other issues moving forward. But welcome everyone. It's the first Friday of the month. So what that means is it's time for Ask the Dietitian. And I am the dietitian here. So my name is Lori Bumbaco. For those of you who I don't know, I work part-time here. I do programs just like this one. So we meet once a month for Ask the Dietitian. We choose a topic, and as always, the participants get to submit their questions, and I prepare a PowerPoint for them. And the questions, it never ceases to amaze me. The participants ask some really great questions every month. So you as an attendee, and if you have registered, if you're watching live, I mean, watching this on YouTube, it doesn't count. But if you registered, you get the slides. Not only do you get the slides, we'll send you access to the recording, so you can kind of pay attention if you're eating lunch right now or vacuuming or something. But we also send something else. I include recipes every month. So some people are looking for ways to eat more plant proteins, which is our topic this month. And so I want to send you some recipes to help you, give you some inspiration for some ideas to do that. Now we're starting a little late, so I'm going to move through rather quickly because there were a bunch of questions that were submitted. And what I'll do is share my screen and share my PowerPoint. And as I mentioned, you will get these slides sent to you, okay? If you want to put anything in the chat, we welcome that. If there's time at the end, I'll try to answer anything that's in the chat or any extra questions if we have time. I'm going to do my best, like I said, though, because we're starting a little late. Okay, so here's the agenda. I'm going to list the questions, provide the answers to the best of my abilities, and then offer some additional resources along the way as well. Now, there's one question that was submitted that I can't really dedicate a lot of time to answer because it's not related to the topic. And this happens every month too. And I wish I had time. I would answer them all if I could. So someone wrote in that he or she is becoming allergic to whole grain wheat. What can I eat in place of this? So wheat is one of the 9 most common allergens in this country, but I would say, is it a true allergy? So I would talk to your healthcare provider. At the center, I can't really talk to you about this because I need to really dedicate time specifically to oncology related concerns, and this doesn't sound like it is one. But is it like a sensitivity or an intolerance? I would get a visit with an allergist, because what if it is an allergy and you need an EpiPen? So this is something to take pretty seriously. If you think it's a sensitivity, I would see if you can work with a dietitian, because maybe there's something more to that to explore, and you can try some very short-term elimination diets to see how much wheat is an issue or what products with wheat are an issue for you. It might be worth considering that also. We have a law passed that protects us in this country. So all food with a label has to include if there is an allergen in the food. Sometimes you'll also see may contain, right? So it might not be within the ingredients, but maybe it was made in a factory where there were some of those allergens, like corn or something, or like soy. So it'll be on the label somewhere. I say always read it. Don't just trust if you have one product you buy like every time you go to the grocery store, because products change, right? So I would say every time if there's a concern about a particular food, I would check. So you can check your labels to see if it contains wheat. It should be labeled now. And that's what I just said. Wheat ingredients may be on the ingredient list, or it could be listed below that it contains wheat. I'll also share this. Chances are, if you think it's a sensitivity, you probably could sort of follow like a gluten-free diet, sort of, but that's where a dietitian can explore that with you further. And there are a lot of people who are gluten-free nowadays because they either have celiac disease or because they have a sensitivity that they believe to be to gluten. And gluten's different than wheat. Okay, wheat is an allergy, right? So again, that's why I want you to get that diagnosed if that's a problem. This is a great resource. It's from the British dietitians, but I think it's really thorough and it answers this question further. So for the person who asked this, hopefully this will be helpful. All right, let's go into those questions. What is the best plant protein? What a great place to start, right? So I gotta say, there's no one best choice, right? all the foods that we eat offer valuable nutrients. Some offer value just because they taste good, right? So sometimes we eat for nutrition, sometimes we eat for pleasure. Plant foods vary in the type and amounts of amino acids they contain, and I'm going to talk more about that today because that's our topic. So different plant foods have different types of amino acids, and we have a need to eat amino acids. We don't have a need for protein, but we have a need for amino acids. I'm going to explain that in a moment. It's important if we ever limit anything. So for the person who's now potentially limiting wheat, this is why you probably should work with a dietitian, because we want to make sure of the foods you're eating that you're eating a variety of them so that you don't become deficient in certain vitamins or minerals or even macronutrients, right? So that's an important consideration, and we will talk about that today too. If someone is vegan, meaning they have no animal foods in their diet, they're advised to eat enough of the foods that have different types and amounts of amino acids. And we're going to explore this further, but whole grains, for example, they're low in lysine. That's one of the essential amino acids. But beans are high in lysine. So if we're eating a variety, we're not just relying on beans, for example, but we're eating some whole grains, we're eating some beans, or we're doing this almost every day, then chances are we're going to be just fine with eating the amounts of amino acids that we need. If you're mostly vegetarian, the goal is to aim for a variety, right? That's what I keep sharing. So some of the best proteins are some of our different whole grains, right? So an example of variety would be oats for breakfast, quinoa at lunch, and farro for dinner. Each of them are whole grains. Each of them have different amino acids. They are all in this family of whole grains, but they also have different nutrients as well, right? Different beans and lentils. So other great choice in terms of the plant protein family. Black beans at breakfast, red lentils at lunch, navy beans at dinner. Different nuts and seeds. And this is the third category, also a great source of plant proteins. Flax seeds at breakfast, peanut butter at lunch or as a snack, and then pumpkin seeds somehow at dinner, right? And I'm just giving you some examples, but a dietitian can help you really more specific with that. What you might have noticed is that these choices are not ultra processed, and that's what I'm going to also explain in another question later. What are the best sources of protein from a plant diet? So I would say legumes. They're considered like the protein powerhouses of the plant kingdom. They're just great options for us. Whole grains, seeds, nuts, and also some vegetables provide plant proteins. If you are using an alternative to dairy, I would read labels. And if you're concerned about eating enough protein, you certainly can look for ones that are sort of mixed and give different types and amounts of protein. So a good goal is about 6 to 9 grams per cup, especially if you're using a milk alternative. That's a pretty good, I think, goal to consider. There's so many options, right? Beans, whether they're dried or canned, great choice. I've seen frozen beans as well. Lentil pasta. Nowadays, we have things like bean pasta and lentil pasta that are really quite nutritious and offer protein as well. Falafel, edamame, green peas, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, peanut butter, almonds. I would say they're all on this list. If you notice, they're mostly minimally processed, right? And they offer a good amount of plant protein, but also a lot of other nutrients. And that's what we're going to talk about. So those choices that I listed have about 8 to 23 grams of protein per serving, and most of us need about 75 grams per day. So if you're someone who wants a little bit more reassurance and you're not really sure how much protein you're eating, that's pretty much a good guideline, but we're going to talk more about that as well. Which plant proteins are now considered a complete protein? So as I mentioned earlier, proteins, well, I didn't mention this earlier, foods that are complete proteins have all 9 essential amino acids. So what that means is that we have to eat those amino acids. There's non-essential amino acids, and it is exactly what it sounds like. We don't need to eat them because actually our body makes them. But the 9 essential amino acids our body does not make, so we need to make sure we're eating enough of them. Animal foods have all 9. And that's why we never really worry about protein or amino acid intake if someone's eating some animal foods. And it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't mean you're eating mostly animal foods. It just means a little bit really does go a long way. And technically that is part of a plant-based diet, is to include some forms in small amounts of animal foods. We need to eat all 9 essential amino acids, so it's important to eat enough of those foods and to understand which foods offer them. and in sufficient amounts, right? So I think the idea here is, again, if you want more specific details, you got to meet with a dietitian. But the thought is like how often you're eating these things. And if it's every day, you're fine. But if you only eat one of these foods maybe once a month, then it might be worth a little more intention to make sure you're eating enough. There are some plant foods that do have all 9 essential amino acids, and that's what someone is basically asking with this question. Which ones have complete proteins? Meaning we don't have to rely on anything else. We're good. We're covered. We're set when we eat these foods. So you might have heard of quinoa being a complete protein, and that's what they're referring to. It has all 9 essential amino acids. It's why it's really so popular. I think they've really kind of cornered the market, and they're like the darling of the plant protein choices. But also we know that buckwheat, hemp seeds, and whole soy foods have all 9 essential amino acids. Now they don't have a lot of them, so that's sometimes the issue. So I would say if you only, out of this list, only eat quinoa, I would say it's time to add in the other choices, right? Because the different amino acids still may not be sort of low, and we want to make sure we're eating enough of them. So even if it is a complete protein and has all 9 essential amino acids, we need to eat enough. It's always a matter of adequacy, right? Because we still might be low even though we're getting some. Okay. Sorry, I just have to minimize something. Okay, moving on. It's okay if we don't perfectly eat all 9 essential amino acids at all meals, right? So as long as you're just getting this variety and eating these foods often, then you're probably okay. I love this question. Will a plant-based diet provide all the essential amino acids and minerals needed for optimal health? This isn't really about protein, but I wanted to take the time to talk about it. So we can do it, but there's a few vitamins and minerals of concern. So vitamin B12 comes up first. If someone's vegan, we worry about their vitamin B12 status. Vitamin B12 is responsible for helping us synthesize energy from the food that we eat, but it also helps make red blood cells. Up to 94% of vegans are deficient in B12, according to the research. So we do think that even if you're not vegan but vegetarian, you should be screened for adequate and maybe a potential deficiency in B12. And you may need to take a supplement. I want you to talk to your provider about that. Sometimes you'll see things marketed as being a source of B12. So algae is a good example, or even like nutritional yeast, but you got to read labels. So if those foods you're looking at, even like a fortified product, look at the labels and see if it does list B12. Okay. And again, that's where a dietitian can help because we can read through the ingredients to look for another word or words that might indicate the food has B12 in it. Next, vitamin D. So, hopefully you all know vitamin D is important for our skeletal health, but it regulates many cellular functions. So really important vitamin that we've discovered more about in the last like 10, 15 years. And it's really exciting. It's found in a lot of fortified products, and it is best absorbed with a source of fat. Mushrooms that are exposed to UVB light may contain vitamin D, and we can actually do this ourselves. We can lay mushrooms in sun for like 10 or 15 minutes, and it'll collect enough vitamin D for us to meet our goals. And that vitamin D lasts in the mushrooms for like up to a week. So if you give them do a little sunbathing, you can put them on the windowsill, and they actually will absorb vitamin D, which is insane. I think that's so cool. We can get blood work done, just like B12 for vitamin D levels. So you just have to ask your provider because you may require a supplement. Many of us, even if we're not eating vegetarian, many of us are deficient in vitamin D or don't eat enough of it. Choline is another vitamin. It's a structural component of cell membranes, and vegans and vegetarians are at risk. So that's why it's on this list as well of not eating enough choline. Choline's in eggs. So if you're tired of paying a lot of money for eggs and eating less right now, this is also might be important for you to think about. We find choline in beans, whole grains, and nuts. So if you're eating those foods every day, chances are you're going to be okay as well. The ones that are highest in choline is wheat germ, flax seeds, and navy beans. They're all a good source of choline and reliable source of it. Calcium now we're going to turn over to minerals. So calcium is primarily has a role with skeletal health, but it's also involved with cell signaling. There's lots of plant-based choices to choose from: broccoli, tempeh, tahini, almonds, oranges, black beans, as well as fortified products. Now, someone asked this question and I didn't list it, so whoever asked the question about oxalates, I hope you're paying attention now. Oxalates are substances and compounds found in mostly in our vegetables, but some other plant foods as well. And what happens is when they're present, our body doesn't absorb as much of that calcium. It sort of binds with the calcium and prevents us from absorbing them. So it's mostly in terms of these foods. If you notice, spinach is high in calcium. However, it's also high in oxalates. And so it's not a reliable source of calcium. I still want you to eat your spinach because it's great for you. But if you're looking for the calcium, I would choose the list above, right? The broccoli, the tempeh, the tahini, those are going to be the best sources for calcium specifically. Iron, another mineral, supplies oxygen to our muscles and it supports immunity and DNA synthesis. It's found in several plant foods, so lentils, tempeh, Swiss chard, also mustard greens, which I'm going to share a little bit more about later, and dried figs, yum, as well as some fortified cereals. You just have to check labels for that. And now we have zinc. So zinc supports immune function. It's not stored in our body long term. So we need to actually eat zinc pretty often, regularly. It's found in wheat germ, again, in fortified cereals. So if you want to read labels, we're looking for a high fiber cereal with not a lot of added sugars, but you'll find zinc is often added to some of our breakfast cereals. Also in oats, corn, and some of our sprouted products, which are very popular. So sprouted breads or sprouted crackers. And the sprouted products help us absorb more of the zinc as well. Iodine is our last mineral that I want to talk about. It's responsible in helping to make our thyroid hormone. So if anyone has thyroid concerns, this might be on your radar as well. It's found, obviously, in iodized salt. But also some of our sea vegetables like kombu is a good example, or wakame. That contains iodine as well. If you're having dairy, even if you're plant-based and includes some dairy like yogurt or milk, you are also probably doing just fine with iodine. We don't want to take an iodine supplement. I used the wrong letter there. More than 500 micrograms daily are not recommended. That's actually going to negatively impact our thyroid function. So we want to just be cognizant of that. And again, if you're thinking of taking a supplement for some reason, I always say run it past your healthcare provider. If your healthcare provider isn't offering much of an answer that you like, then that's where dietitians can be helpful as well. Okay, moving on. So it's easier than you think. I don't want to make you feel afraid that you're not going to eat enough of those vitamins and minerals on a plant-based diet. But the ones listed, those are the ones if you are vegan. I think like pay closer attention to the foods that I listed so that you can make sure you're including them regularly. Or if you're concerned that you might have a deficiency, then you can bring this to your healthcare provider. I've read this somewhere, and I think this is a pretty good rule of thumb too, that if we're eating vegan, certainly we want to follow these guidelines. But if we're eating more than 80% of our foods from plants, these micronutrients might be inadequate in our diet. So again, it's just being intentional and making sure you're including those foods and those sources of vitamins and minerals. Sometimes this is why we take a multi-mineral, multivitamin supplement as well, just to make sure we're eating enough. Okay, so how much plant protein do you recommend daily? I think that's a great question. So experts suggest that anyone who has been diagnosed with cancer consume anywhere from 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight. A dietitian can help you figure that out as well. Now that amount is going to differ if someone has declined kidney function. So that's a great question to ask your physician if you're concerned, or your healthcare provider. You know, are your kidneys functioning okay? Because too much protein for someone who has declined kidney function may exacerbate that condition. Also, for someone who is presently on chemotherapy and is losing a lot of weight or a lot of muscle, we may increase that amount of protein for that person. So let's go back to that recommendation about 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight. So that would look like exactly 68 to 102 grams per day for someone who weighs 150 pounds. And I just kind of took that as a relative number for you to understand how we would do that math. Most of us consume about 90 grams per day. So we're probably falling within that range and we're probably okay, right? Now, vegetarians are probably consuming a little bit less, but most vegetarians do really well, just fine, meeting their protein goal as well. That's sort of a myth that's out there. So some experts recommend that during chemo, we should not eat, just in case anyone is watching this or is attending right now. They recommend that we shouldn't eat more than 65% of our protein from plant sources if we're on active chemo. The reason for that is it might be too low in some of those amino acids, and animal proteins have been found to have a greater anabolic stimuli. You can sound like sciencey when you use those words with your friends. Compared to plant choices, those animal proteins seems to really support muscle health. And muscle health is compromised during chemo. Not as much after chemo, right? And certainly the more time spent after chemo, the better off someone's muscle health can be and the less support it might need, because the chemo really does seem to do a number on muscle health. So a good estimate is that I've heard some say is that we look at it like a 70-30. So 70% plants, 30% animal foods if we're done with treatment and we want to move in a plant-based direction. And we're not necessarily wanting to be vegan, because vegan would be 100%, right? But we can eat 100% plant foods and be vegan and still meet all of the requirements for our health. We can be confident about that. Okay, are there plant proteins that are better than others, or are any that should be eaten or avoided? Does tofu pose an estrogen issue for certain cancers? Great question. So whole and minimally processed plant foods retain more nutrition. That's what makes them the preferred choice. Okay, so the items I listed before, beans and lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds. Think about the whole big family of choices in each of those categories. There's so many to choose from. Now, some people ask me, are canned beans processed? Yes, they are. However, they're sort of an exception to that processed rule. And we put them in the great choice category, right? They're so convenient. They're just versatile. In a pinch, they're a great option. If you prefer dried beans and have the wherewithal, the time, the energy, the equipment, it doesn't take much equipment. But if you do like dried beans, I encourage that as well. I think that's great. Pre-cooked lentils are something that's another good example of like a processed food. However, it's not really. I wouldn't label it as processed. It's a great choice in terms of nutrition. And then bean burgers. So this is a whole different animal. Lots of different choices in the bean burger family, in the frozen section, or some might be even in the refrigerated section. We have to read labels here, but some are great choices, and I'm actually going to talk about this in a moment. Highly processed meat alternatives are not necessarily better. Somebody asked a question about this, so I'm going to talk more about it. Depending on the brand, nutrient content varies. So this is where we want to be like critical, read that label, read the ingredients, and see if we can make some comparisons and make the best choice for ourselves. Some meat alternatives have more sodium, actually a lot more sodium, not just more, but a lot more than the original product. And sometimes there's questionable ingredients that are new to the market and may not be adequately tested. So we'll talk more about that as well. So now we'll move on to that question about whole soy foods and tofu. They are safe to consume. They provide compounds that exert cancer protective qualities. And so I think it would be beyond the question of safety. We already know that they're safe to consume, but not eating them, you would miss out on some really helpful compounds that might help protect us from cancer. So I think it would be a shame that because there still seems to be this lingering concern over the safety of whole soy foods, that we're actually doing a disservice, right, by not kind of squashing this myth. So I'm going to try to do that today. Phytoestrogens are in whole soy foods. They do not cause our bodies to make more estrogen. They don't communicate with breast cancer cells. There's just no relationship at all. Okay, I kind of wish no one called them phytoestrogens, because that's what kind of created the hysteria about them all. But here's what we know, that women, and this is confirmed through research, women who were diagnosed with breast cancer and eat soy have a reduced risk for recurrence, and they live longer. So we don't need to worry about safety concerns. We can enjoy soy, and especially the minimally processed versions. So this is a myth that eating soy foods are not safe, or they cause breast cancer, or may increase the risk for recurrence. They are recommended. They're a cancer fighter. They're also a source of fiber, but plant proteins as well. So I want you to be confident that you're okay to have tofu. But what else is there besides Tofu. What a good segue, right? So I would say like if I were to list my top 5 plant proteins, if I were forced to make a list, hopefully you'll find this helpful. So I'm going to start with hemp seeds. So that's a picture of hemp seeds there. And they have about 6.5 grams per serving. So you get to decide, are you going to have half a serving? You're going to have 2 servings. You get to decide, right? But it adds up pretty quickly. They have all 9 essential amino acids, and they're really great to just add to things, right? Add to your hot cereal in the morning, put it on top of a salad, add it to your smoothie if you're already doing that. They don't have a huge, flavor or impact in terms of texture. They're kind of soft. I think they're a great choice. You'll find them in most grocery stores. Sometimes they're in like the natural food section or the organic section, but really a great one to have. I would say because there are some oils in it to keep it in the fridge or at least protect it like you would an oil, in that it could go rancid because of the fats that are in it. I have a recipe for this and I kind of want to eat this now for dinner. That's like a Thai peanut dish, right? So peanuts. What a great way to incorporate some plant proteins. They have about 8 grams per serving. They are technically a legume, so we want to just a reminder that that means it's low in lysine, right? So we want to have some whole grains there, and maybe if you put the peanuts with a whole wheat pasta, now you're having completeness in terms of the plant proteins for the essential amino acids. Peanuts and peanut butter, they're great for a snack. They're great to add to some of your savory dishes. And I think a great example is like a Thai dish, right? So if you look to some of those traditional ethnic recipes, it could be very inspiring because they are typically plant-based, I find, right? Lastly, for the top, this is number 3, and this is in random order. Okay. Pumpkin seeds, 8 grams per serving. So many people are surprised by that. They are a great source of protein. They're low in methionine, right? So we might have pumpkin seeds again with some whole grains. So they're good to snack on or add as a garnish to soup is one of my favorite things to do. Or make as part of a trail mix or put inside a homemade, snack bar. Great ways to really make sure that you're incorporating these plant proteins in just really simple ways. Okay, the last 2, this is one of my favorites. That's tempeh. So tempeh is it's tofu's meatier cousin. Sorry, that's a typo there. So if you're familiar with tofu but haven't tried tempeh, I invite you to do so. You will not regret it. If you're not a fan of tofu, you might really prefer tempeh. So what you see in the image there is that it's instead of it being like this one consistency that tofu is because it's the way that it's processed, tempeh it keeps those whole soybeans intact and they ferment it usually with another grain, sometimes a couple other grains like rice or barley, and they ferment it in this cake and we can kind of slice it off into slices like that or even cube it. It holds up really well to heat. So it's great to saute. It's great to put on the grill, believe it or not, but sometimes I'll even just put it in the oven at a high temperature. I like to crumble it so you can really just use your hands and crumble this apart and use it in a way that you would use ground meat. And it's fantastic. So think like tacos or think like a stuffed zucchini. You can use this tempeh as a replacement. It's really fantastic. And just like tofu, it kind of takes up the flavor of whatever you put with it, right? Really great ideas here. Lastly, oats, and sometimes this is a surprise. So oats have 11 grams per cup. Which is that's a lot of protein, right? And all oats are great. We don't have to feel forced to do steel cut oats if we like old fashioned or instant oats, because I think they all serve a purpose in terms of culinary applications, but they all are great choices. Some have a little bit more fiber, but they all have different amounts of fiber, but they all also have a good amount of protein. Okay, so the fiber in it helps control our blood sugars. There's so many ways to use oats as well. I think each of these choices are so versatile. So you can either just literally make your bowl of oats in the morning or make some overnight oats if you're meal planning or prepping homemade snack bars I mentioned earlier. I love to keep old-fashioned oats on hand. I like the texture of them, but you can put them into a spice grinder or a coffee grinder and grind them up to the consistency of like breading or breadcrumbs. And then now use this as a replacement. You're going to add more protein, and especially if you're making like a bean burger or a bean meatball. Now what you're doing is you're using beans and a whole grain, right? So now you're really ramping up the protein by doing something like that. But plus you're adding a ton of nutrition. right? So hopefully those give you some ideas for options other than tofu, sorry. So why is plant protein better? Like why all this conversation? Why all the rage about plant proteins? Well, they're associated with reducing the risk for several chronic diseases. That's why. So type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and some cancer types, especially colorectal cancer, that one is really the strongest evidence at this point. Plant proteins contain significantly more vitamins and minerals, and especially fiber. So animal proteins are missing out on that fiber. There tends to be healthy fats in our plant proteins, but also these special compounds, phytochemicals that I'm going to talk about in a moment, and antioxidants. They also have less calories, like when we compare them per serving compared to animal proteins. So for people who are managing their weight, this is also an appealing option. We want to be careful. However, and you'll always hear me discuss this in one-on-one consults or even in big programs to big groups, we don't really want to label things, right, as being good or bad, right? Because animal foods aren't really bad for us, right? It's just that plant proteins are great. They're great for us. There is a lot of debate going on, I think more recently too, that the overall composition of really the foods that we're eating. So if you think about plant proteins are a good example, something like a plant food that has protein in it, okay, great, but it also has all of these other things in it, right? So that whole package is a good package, not just because of the protein that's in it, right? So the same can go for animal foods. We want to look at the whole package. So animal foods, yes, they have a lot of protein, but maybe something like, I'm just going to use yogurt for an example, because it's fermented and has probiotics. Maybe that's the reason, part of the reason why that's a better package for us at a certain time in our life, right? We really want to be fluid and think about these ideas instead of sort of having these concrete, absolute yes or no, good or bad. Okay. Time will tell, but there does seem to be a benefit to substituting more plant proteins in place of animal choices. So I think the reason why there's a lot of people attending today, and a lot of times people ask me about plant-based diets, it's because the science is looking in this direction. Besides the science for our health, we know that plant proteins are better for the planet. Okay, so sometimes that's the motivation why people are going plant-based, and I support that as well. So how do we eat more plant-based meals? I think that's the important question here. So more of the plant foods that you already like, just eat them more. Maybe there's one thing you like, a vegetarian chili, make it more often, or find different ways to make it. Replace or eliminate animal foods that you're willing to part ways with. If you're like, you know what? I don't need that breakfast sausage in the morning. I'm kind of tired of it. It was just a habit. I'm gonna make a tempeh sausage now. There's lots of ideas. Make a gradual change, right? So maybe you are familiar with the campaign about Meatless Monday. Maybe you do this on Mondays, literally. But maybe you decide you want to do it midweek or over the weekend and do another meatless meal during the week, which would be great. Involving others in the process it always works. It always helps because they keep us accountable. They might motivate us. Maybe we could delegate, right? If someone else in the house wants to eat a certain way, we can help ourselves in this way. And then stock your kitchen. There's so many staples that can help you easily eat plant-based. So canned beans are a great example. And this is just 3 ways using chickpeas. So that's a chickpea pasta for dinner. A roasted chickpea trail mix, yum. Curry chickpea salad, yum, right? And all from a can of chickpeas. So it gives you, like, sometimes those foundational foods that are super versatile give us those easy to go options. All right, what about the extra fiber from plants? Is that what helps us, or is it the fact that meat is limited? Great question. Really, really thoughtful there. So what is it about plants that make them healthier? I think it's a combination of things, right? So it's not just one of those things. It's not either or. I appreciate the question. I think it's great because it really gets you thinking. They are a source of fiber, which most of us do not eat enough of. So yes, that is one of the reasons why they are a better choice for us. But they also provide a significant amount of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and these special compounds, phytochemicals. So this is also adding to the benefit, right? These things plus the fiber makes it great for us. Meat and animal foods don't have a lot of those things. Doesn't have a lot of fiber. Doesn't have a lot of antioxidants and phytochemicals, although animal foods do have vitamins and minerals, right? But those phytochemicals are special. They're what give color, odor, and flavor to plant foods. They're only found in plant foods. And we were historically so excited about phytochemicals. And then I don't know what happened. Like, did we stop doing research? I'm still excited about them. Here's what has been shown in preclinical data. Phytochemicals stimulate our immune system. They block substances from becoming carcinogens. They reduce inflammation. They help repair DNA. They reduce oxidative damage. They slow the growth rate of cancers. They trigger damaged cells or ones that are about to become cancerous. They trigger them to kill themselves. That's called apoptosis. And they help regulate hormones. So imagine if you're eating a lot of plant foods a lot of the time, you're reaping the benefits here, right? Now, if you eat animal foods some of the time and still doing a lot of these plant foods, you're still going to reap those benefits, right? It's not like an either or an absolute here. If you eat a lot of animal foods and not a lot of plant foods, well, then you're not reaping the benefits. Right. So hopefully I answered that question okay. But I like that. It's the idea of addition. What are you adding? What value are you adding to your diet by including and increasing more plant foods? Hopefully we have enough time for this. All right, which plant proteins do you recommend for an alkaline diet? What a great question. All right, for those of you who are not familiar with the alkaline diet, it's a claim that we need to eat this way because cancer cells have been shown to thrive in a body that is acidic. Meaning to say, you can put cancer cells in a petri dish, and if it's an acidic environment, they're really, really happy. They're having a party. So what if our body's acidic? Are they having a party? That's the thought. So if we eat certain foods, we can make our body alkaline. That's the claim here. So for a food to be alkaline, the pH scale would range between 7 and 14. The diet is also known as alkaline ash or alkaline acid, and it's based on lab combustion of food. We don't eat that way. Our body doesn't metabolize food that way either. Now, most of the food on the list are plant foods, but there's some exceptions. So buckwheat, oats, coffee, on the people who claim that we need to eat alkaline, those are limited, which is a shame because buckwheat is a great choice. Oats are a great choice. Coffee, all cancer fighters I see on that list. Do they create more acid environment? Not quite, and I'm going to explain that. So a lot of experts are questioning this. That's because research has found that cancer cells that thrive in this acidic environment, it was only done in the lab. But our body operates in a much more complicated and complex environment than that little lab and petri dish. Our body has a lot of compensatory mechanisms that maintain different pH levels throughout our whole body. We can't override that. So for a good example, if our body becomes more acidic, what happens is our lungs compensate and we have different respiration rate because of that. Or our kidneys, they're really the primary players here. They compensate and they make urine that's more acidic. So no wonder if you can test your urine, you can tell if it's acidic or not, right? But guess what? That doesn't mean the whole body is acidic. It just means your urine is because the body's trying to fix itself. Okay. So this theory is starting to get a little faulty here. Hopefully you see. Now, some foods that are considered acidic, as I shared, are really healthy choices, and they're not. They don't create an acidic environment in our body if we eat those foods. I want you to eat whole grains, beans, and some vegetables. All right, so I learned this in preparation for this PowerPoint, and I'm going to name names. It's time. I have to do it. So this gentleman, Robert Young, that's his picture. Thanks to Wikipedia. He is a naturopathic practitioner, and he authored several books that really sort of exploded this whole theory about the alkaline diet, and he called it the pH miracle. I think there's probably like newer editions of this book that are probably still available if we wanted to buy them. At the height of his career, he claimed to have cured some people, and especially one person, she became a celebrity, with breast cancer using this pH miracle approach in alkaline diet. And she, as I think they both appeared on Oprah Winfrey to make this claim. She, however, died shortly after the announcement. And he was convicted in 2016 on 2 of 3 counts of theft and practicing medicine without a license. A jury awarded $105 million in damages to the patient he persuaded to forgo effective treatment in favor of his alkaline diet. So we want to just pause about a lot of these sensational claims and these miracle cures. And I think, it's not my job to tell someone what to do or what to decide. However, I think I share this information because we want to be critical of some of these claims that are sensationalized. It's a little concerning. So about this alkaline diet, there's no available evidence to support this claim. The research concluded there's nothing that we know of to suggest that they are beneficial. When we test our urine and it's a different pH, this does not change our body's pH. Our stomach is a great example. Our stomach has to be acidic. It has to make sure it kills the pathogens that we might ingest in our food. So we cannot override any of this with a diet. Many of the foods on the alkaline diet are healthy choices, however, right? So a lot of plant foods are on the alkaline diet, and that's not the reason, though, that those plant foods are healthy. It's not because they change our pH. It's because they're really great for us for so many reasons, right? And some of them I listed for you. And now we're coming up on time, so just bear with me. We're almost there. So this question was great. What about those meat substitutes, right? Some of those very popular, and they're only going to keep coming up with them. So I just want to use this as an example. These are two different products on the market that are really sort of meant to be like alternatives. Purple Roots, and then this, I'm not going to name names here. But when we look at ingredients, the Purple Roots looks impressive and the pictures capture it. It is a whole food, right? It is minimally processed. It's beets, it's white beans, it's carrots, it's purple sweet potato, it's white quinoa, it's cannellini bean, it's yellow onion. Like, we know all of those things. What's in the other product is highly processed. It's a soy protein concentrate with some oils. So there also are, even though it's 2% or less, meaning very minimal amounts, but some of the others are questionable. We don't even really know what soy leg hemoglobin is. It's a very new ingredient. It hasn't been tested. So we don't even know what this is in this product, right? So I think I use this as a very obvious example of like which one's the better choice. We know the answer, right? If we go right to those ingredients, you can't hide, right? It's very obvious that one is minimally processed and is more like a whole food. Now, keep in mind, total diet matters, right? So meat substitutes do not make or break a healthy pattern, no matter which one you choose on that first slide. There's lots to choose from, though, right, in terms of even our regular meat. So if it's beef, chicken, pork, seafood, eggs, or the substitutes that are coming out on the market for them, there's so many. There's egg substitutes, there's pork substitutes, there's seafood substitutes, and this market is exploding. So I think the best advice I can give is read those ingredients, and that's going to help you make a decision. Some of the products use whole foods, like the one I showed. Some are highly processed, and some use extruded or isolated ingredients like that soy protein isolate or soy protein concentrate. So they do this to sort of mimic the original, right? The taste, the texture of the meat. But I think if we want the original, we have to eat the original and not fake it, right? Or if we want to explore different plant-based whole food versions like the other product did, then why not, right? But it's not going to be a burger. That's because it's not, right? It's a burger made of plants, basically. Some of these meat alternatives use binders like coconut or palm oils to help accomplish this, or some other suspect ingredients. Whether or not a choice is healthy really depends on the product, so that's where reading labels is important. Some are very high in sodium as well as saturated fats and might be even higher than the original meat or fish was. Certainly, some products can fit into a healthy diet if they're consumed occasionally. However, the ultimate benefit of consuming minimally processed whole plant foods are supported by the evidence. So if you're making those choices for nutrition, then I want you to stick to the ones that are like the originals, the beans, the lentils, the whole grains, the seeds, the nuts. The research supports that they help our health, right? The other ones, the meat alternatives, there's no research to say they help us, right? So that's what the evidence shows. If that's what you're looking for and that's your goal, then that's the answer. Okay. I think this is the last question. What are the leanest proteins and what is the best vegan plant protein? So if we think of lean, we're thinking healthier proteins uh, maybe because they have less saturated fat, but some of our meat and especially fatty fish or some of our animal proteins like fatty fish have healthy fats. So even though it's not lean, they're beneficial and that they're recommended that we consume them, right? So think about that as well. So salmon, mackerel, herring, anchovies, sardines are very high in omega-3s. Most of us are not eating recommended amounts of omega-3s, so we want to consider that. Other great choices that are low in saturated fat. So the leaners, right? The lean proteins, lean cuts of meat, extra lean ground meat. I like the idea of ground turkey, ground chicken, eggs, poultry, low fat dairy. Those are all lean choices, so they have less saturated fat. Plant proteins don't have a lot of saturated fat, lots of fiber and nutrients otherwise. So beans, lentils, whole grain, seeds, nuts, their minimally processed versions are preferred. They're going to have less sodium. They're going to retain more of their nutrition. They don't have the added sugars. They don't have the saturated fats added to them as well. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Just to reinforce the bottom line here. All right, so I want to share some resources. The Vegetarian Dietetic Practice Group, great website for everything you could want to know that a dietitian would know. The Vegetarian Resource Group is very comprehensive. Lots of recipes, if that's what you're looking for, or lots of different practical ways to use vegan ingredients, if that's what you're kind of thinking about. I love Happy Cow. So if you're traveling, if you just happen to be in the area and you're thinking, where's there a vegan restaurant near me? You can look it up, right? You could filter by your zip code. And then I thought it would be a really just wonderful idea to think about this month and celebrating Black History and thinking about plant-based recipes to honor it. And so if you're looking for diversity, this might be something that you appeals to you. I know it did to me. I'm going to share recipes as well as the slides after today. So why not try some tempeh tacos? Why not try some Thai zoodles? So that's using zucchini noodles and some other vegetables that looks delicious. Like I totally want that for dinner. And then also I thought, why not a slow cooked black-eyed pea with greens? And that's a vegan version of it. So really comforting, wonderful choice this time of year, but all really high in these plant proteins. So our next Ask the Dietitian is the first Friday in March. We choose a topic that is in line with National Nutrition Month, which is Food Connects Us. So that's the theme this year for National Nutrition Month, but I am thinking sort of what's our relationship with food? And that's sort of where we're going with that. You'll see a description on the website. So submit your questions related to how you feel about your connection with food or your connection with others around food and anything you have related to that. And it should be a great time to discuss. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share there. And I have like a minute if someone has questions.